So, imagine for a second that you create this absolute masterpiece. You put it out into the world and you basically consider it a complete embarrassing failure if anyone actually praises your writing skills.
Right.
Which is wild, right? You spend years mastering your craft, but your ultimate goal as an artist is to completely erase yourself from the work.
Yeah, it goes against everything we're taught.
Exactly. I mean, we usually think about experiencing great art or literature as, walking into this grand museum. You've got these massive, ornate gold picture frames, dramatic lighting, velvet ropes everywhere. You stand there completely separate from the masterpiece, and you're just admiring the brushstrokes, the clever phrasing, the sheer effort of the artist trying to impress you.
Well, the art in that scenario is basically an object demanding your attention.
Yeah.
The artist is essentially grabbing you by the collar and saying, look at my genius. Look how beautifully I constructed this.
Right, look at me.
Exactly. It's an exercise in ego.
Yeah.
And that goes for both the creator who made it and, honestly, for the consumer who wants to feel sophisticated for, understanding it.
So true. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking an incredible stack of sources that fundamentally challenges how we interact with literature and honestly, how our brains process reality itself.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. We are diving deep into the writings of R.H. Blyth, focusing specifically on his masterful 4-volume series where he translates and analyzes Japanese haiku.
Yeah.
And our mission today for you listening is to figure out how a simple 17-syllable poem can radically rewire the way you look at, say, a rainy night or a frog or just a common weed growing by a chain link fence.
Yeah, we should probably establish right away that Blyth is not, he's not offering this dry, mechanical literary review of syllable structures.
No, not at all.
Right. He argues that haiku isn't merely poetry in the way the Western canon typically defines it. It's more of a highly specific, disciplined gateway to what philosophers call the thing in itself.
The thing in itself.
Yeah. It is this method of stripping away the human tendency to narrativize or categorize and judge the world so that you can actually witness reality before your brain has a chance to slap a label on it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that concept of the thing in itself, I mean, that is some heavy philosophical jargon.
It is, yeah.
But the way our brains normally work, if I look out my window right now and see a tree, I don't actually see the pure reality of the tree. My brain instantly categorizes it. I see an oak, or I see potential firewood, or I see that thing blocking my view of the street. I'm constantly filtering the tree through its usefulness to me.
And that filtering process, that is the human ego at work. In the West, we have this deeply ingrained idea, I think John Keats famously phrased it, that a poem or a work of art is a thing of beauty and a joy forever.
Right.
It's a monument to human emotion.
Yeah.
But Blyth counters this by introducing the Zen concept of muga.
Muga.
Right, muga. It translates literally to no self or selflessness. Blyth argues that the most defining quality of haiku is its self-annihilative nature.
Self-annihilative. Wow.
Yeah, meaning when you compose a haiku, or even when you just read one properly, you have to enter this state of muga. You have to drop that filtering process entirely.
Which, I mean, that creates a massive paradox.
Okay.
So if I'm a poet sitting down to write a poem, my inherent motivation is to write something beautiful or profound. I want to be remembered.
Of course.
So trying to intentionally erase my ego feels a bit like trying to force myself to fall asleep. Like, the harder I try to do it, the more awake I become.
That's a great point. And Blyth addresses that paradox by completely changing the definition of what a poem is even supposed to be.
Okay.
If a haiku has too much literary charm, if it utilizes clever wordplay or dramatic metaphors, it actually fails. Yeah. Because you're noticing the poet instead of the subject.
Ah, I see.
Blyth uses 2 brilliant metaphors from the text to explain this. First, he calls haiku a finger post, like a wooden signpost on a trail, pointing toward a destination. The sign itself isn't the destination.
Right.
And second, he compares it to a raft. A raft is a highly practical tool used to cross a rushing river. But once you've crossed the river and reached the other shore, the raft is unwanted.
You just leave it behind.
Exactly. You leave it on the riverbank. You certainly don't hoist this heavy, wet raft on your back and carry it around the forest, just marveling at how beautifully the logs were tied together.
So the poem is completely disposable.
Yes.
It's like looking through a perfectly clean pane of glass. If I notice a smudge on the glass, or even if the glass is tinted this really beautiful stained glass color, The window has actually failed its primary purpose.
That's a perfect analogy.
I am supposed to only see the landscape outside. The poem is just the transparent glass.
And that actually leads to a crucial question for you listening right now. Consider how often we navigate our own lives getting completely caught up in the packaging of an experience rather than the experience itself.
Oh, all the time.
Think about watching a stunning sunset. But instead of just experiencing it, you pull out your phone to take a picture. Then you spend 10 minutes trying to think of a clever caption.
Right. Guilty.
We all do it.
Yeah.
But in doing that, you've abandoned the sunset to curate your own ego. Haiku is basically the discipline of leaving the phone in your pocket. Blyth calls it the mutual reunited life of poet and things.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
Because if the goal of the art is for the packaging to disappear entirely, why use such a rigid mathematical box to put it in? Traditional haiku is strictly 17 syllables, 575.
Right.
If I'm sitting there literally counting syllables on my fingers, I'm doing math. I am heavily focused on the packaging. Doesn't that strict structure force the intellect to get involved and ruin the moga?
It definitely seems that way at first glance, but the strictness of the form actually acts as a pressure cooker.
A pressure cooker.
Yeah, when you are confined to just 17 syllables, you simply do not have the luxury of including adjectives or complex metaphors or your own emotional commentary.
There's no room.
Exactly. The constraint burns off the superfluous ego until only the raw, objective image remains. The structure is so impossibly tight that you literally cannot fit your ego inside of it.
Oh, wow. Okay, that makes sense. The form forces the brevity.
Yeah.
But this constraint creates a really fascinating tension when we look at the broader literary world.
How do you mean?
Well, if a haiku is just a 17-syllable disposable pointer, how does it stand alongside the grand monumental epics of Western literature? If I stack up a tiny poem about a leaf falling next to, say, the Iliad, it feels like bringing a toothpick to a sword fight.
It does, and Blyth makes an incredibly audacious comparison regarding this. He actually devotes a significant portion of his analysis to defending it.
Really?
Yeah, he places the legendary 17th century haiku master Basho on the exact same pedestal as Western giants, like Homer, Shakespeare, Dante, and even the composer Johann Sebastian Bach.
Bach. Okay, we'll get to Bach in a second.
Yeah, it's wild. Now, Blyth concedes that Basho lacks certain Western literary hallmarks. He doesn't possess Dante's grim theological strength, or Homer's grasp of epic warfare, or Shakespeare's ability to create these complex, morally gray human characters.
Right.
Yet, Blyth argues, Basho achieves total equality with them by touching the very nerve of life through minute particulars.
Okay, I want to break down how he actually does that mechanically, because the sources provide some stunning examples. Let's look at the Dante comparison first.
What?
How does a guy writing 3-line poems about bugs equate to the author of the Inferno?
Well, in Dante's Inferno, there is this highly specific, quiet passage where Dante notices little flowers that have been bent and shut tight by the chill of the night.
Okay.
And as soon as the morning sunlight whitens them, they erect themselves and open on their stems. Blyth points out that in that specific moment, Dante is seeing the elemental, universal truth of nature.
He's not moralizing.
Exactly. He stops moralizing about heaven and hell for a second and just observes the resilience of a tiny flower. And Basho operates entirely, 100% of the time, in that microspace.
Wow.
He has this unerring radar for those tiny, seemingly insignificant fractions of a second which, when strung together, actually constitute our real waking life.
And then Blyth pivots to Shakespeare. I mean, we think of Shakespeare's universality, his profound empathy for the human condition.
Right.
Blyth quotes a line from Shakespeare, "Truly, sir, I am a poor fellow that would live." It's just this statement of basic raw survival and dignity.
Yeah.
Blyth argues that Basho applies that exact same profound empathy, but he extends it beyond humanity into the inanimate world. The text highlights a very specific verse by Basho. It reads, "Looking carefully, there is a shepherd's purse blooming under the hedge."
And the context of what a shepherd's purse actually is makes this comparison click.
Was it?
A shepherd's purse is a common, incredibly resilient, but rather plain weed.
Yeah.
It is not a magnificent red rose. It's not a towering, majestic oak tree. It is the kind of vegetation you would normally walk right past or, actively try to poison with weed killer. But the poem says, looking carefully. Basho stops.
He pays attention.
He looks at this weed, and he grants it the same universal right to exist, the same dignity that Shakespeare grants to a king or a beggar. He completely bypasses the human tendency to categorize nature into a hierarchy of important and unimportant things.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because I can wrap my head around comparing a poet to another poet, but then Blythe compares Basho to the composer Johann Sebastian Bach.
Oh, this is a great part.
I mean, a Baroque German organist weaving these massive, mathematically complex fugues feels like he belongs in a completely different universe than a minimalist Japanese poet wandering the countryside. How do those two possibly connect?
They connect through the concept of what Blythe terms vital inevitability.
Vital inevitability.
Think about how a Bach prelude flows. It doesn't start with a massive dramatic crash designed to make you jump out of your seat. It just begins, logically, inevitably, like a river flowing or a gear turning.
Right, it just is.
Blythe explicitly contrasts Basho and Bach with later Romantic composers like Beethoven and Wagner. He argues that Beethoven's symphonies are often filled with what he provocatively calls hysteria.
Hysteria.
Yeah, sweeping, forced emotional manipulation. Beethoven is grabbing you by the shoulders and demanding that you feel triumphant, or demanding that you feel despair.
Which goes right back to the artist demanding attention for their own ego.
Exactly.
Beethoven's music is undeniably brilliant, but you never forget that Beethoven wrote it. You feel his personal anguish in every single chord.
Contrast that with Bach, or with Basho. Their work operates with absolute serenity. They possess an expressiveness that never explicitly aims at beauty, but achieves it almost as a byproduct of simply presenting the truth.
Wow.
They aren't trying to manipulate your emotions, they are simply presenting the math of the universe. Blythe writes that both Basho and Bach are awake in a world that, for most people, exists only as a world of dreams.
Because we are usually sleepwalking through a world constructed entirely of our own emotional noise. We project our anxieties onto the weather, our ambitions onto our careers, our insecurities onto other people. We never just see the shepherd's purse weed.
We really don't. And to see how a poet practically achieves this, how you actually write a poem without intellectualizing or inserting that emotional hysteria, we have to look at what is arguably the most famous haiku ever written.
Okay, lay it on me.
It is Basho's poem about the frog. It goes, "The old pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of the water." Or in Japanese, furu inga.
See, if you approach that with a Western literary mindset, you're sitting there waiting for the punchline.
Right.
You hear frog jumps in water and you think, okay, what's the metaphor? Does the frog represent my fleeting youth? Is the dark pond a symbol for the depths of my millennial despair? We are so desperate to make the frog about us.
We treat nature like Aesop's fables. We're constantly mining the natural world for moral lessons. But Blythe insists that the mechanical brilliance of this poem is its total, unapologetic lack of a moral payload.
There's no lesson.
None. It is a direct, unmediated grasp of a physical event.
But how does it actually do that? Because, I mean, I could easily say, a car drove by, it made a noise. That isn't a masterpiece. It's just a boring sentence. What elevates the frog?
The difference lies in that concept of muga, the merging of the observer and the observed. In a boring sentence about a car, you are still a separate ego sitting in a chair judging the car.
Right.
In Basho's poem, in that split second of the splash, the boundary between the poet's mind, the physical frog, and the water just dissolves. It was one instantaneous event. He is capturing the pure suchness of the moment, the raw sensory data of the universe happening before the human brain has a chance to say, ew, a slimy frog, or I should write a profound poem about this.
There's another verse in the sources by a later poet named Shiki that illustrates this dissolution of the ego perfectly.
Oh, the mushroom one.
Yes. It reads, "My voice becomes the wind mushroom hunting." Talk about mundane. You are literally just wandering through the damp woods, shouting out to your friends while looking for fungus.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you realize your voice isn't special. It doesn't carry some grand human authority. It is literally just another vibration in the forest. It becomes the wind.
And Blythe makes a really fascinating point about the mechanics of that Shiki poem. He says the poetic connection between the human voice, the wind, and the mushrooms is strictly non-logical.
Unlogical.
If you try to analyze it with your intellect, if you try to write an essay on why the voice became the wind, the poem falls apart. The connection has to be felt, as Blythe puts it, in the pit of the stomach.
Oh, I like that.
It reads almost like a sterile botanical observation, but it is infused with that pure suchness. To add human logic to it would be to rebuild the ego that the poem just worked so hard to erase.
It's like the moment you try to explain why a joke is funny, it stops being funny. You just have to experience the voice becoming the wind. But this brings up a really profound psychological consequence.
With that,
Well, if you commit to this worldview, if you spend your entire life practicing muga, constantly erasing your ego to become one with ponds, frogs, weeds, and the wind, what is left of you, doesn't that just leave you completely empty and isolated?
that is a fantastic question, and it leads us directly to the emotional core of Japanese poetry. It's the concept of sabisa,
Sabishisa.
right, which translates to loneliness.
Yeah.
But we have to drastically recalibrate our definition of that word.
Yeah, because modern loneliness is generally considered a highly negative state, right? It's FOMO.
Exactly.
It's sitting on your couch on a Friday night, scrolling through social media, seeing everyone else at a party, and feeling this neurotic, anxious pit in your stomach because you feel disconnected and irrelevant.
But sabishisa is the exact opposite of that neurotic anxiety. It is a profound, beautiful, and vast loneliness. Blyth associates it with the traditional idea of winter seclusion.
Inner seclusion.
It is an anguished yet entirely serene acceptance of the ephemeral nature of all things, very much including ourselves. It is the realization that the universe does not revolve around your personal dramas.
It's almost like the comfort of insignificance. Everything fades, everything passes, and you are just a temporary, quiet observer passing through.
Beautifully put. To illustrate this, Blyth points to the recurring imagery of the withered moor in these poems, known as the Karina.
The Karina.
Imagine a stark, freezing, desolate Japanese landscape in the dead of winter. All the colorful distractions of spring blossoms and summer leaves are just dead and gone. You are left with the bare, stripped-down reality of existence. It is cold, and it is true.
Wow.
This theme culminates incredibly powerfully in Basho's final death poem.
The imagery in this final poem is haunting. Basho knows he is dying. He has spent his entire life wandering the country, observing minutiae, actively practicing the erasure of his own ego. And when the end comes, he doesn't write a grand philosophical treatise about heaven. He doesn't write about his legacy or his terror of dying. He writes, "Ill on a journey, my dreams wander over a withered moor."
Returning to Blyth's analysis, he argues that this specific type of acceptance is what gave Basho his superhuman insight into the value of ordinary things.
Right.
By accepting the barren, withered moor as the ultimate baseline reality of the human condition, Basho freed himself from the panic that plagues so much of our daily lives. He wasn't fighting the winter. He achieved that back-like serenity.
So what does this all mean? It is a radically different way to navigate existence.
It really is.
Instead of running away from the bleakest, coldest parts of life sickness, isolation, winter, he invites you to look directly at them and find a deep, quiet resonance there. You view your life not as the central, dramatic narrative of the universe, but just as a dream wandering over a frozen field.
And it is a philosophy that requires constant discipline because our default setting is always to protect and inflate the self.
So, to synthesize our journey today through R.H. Blyth's monumental work, we started by confronting our Western need to build artistic monuments, replacing it with the Zen practice of muga, or selflessness. We learned that a true poem is just a disposable raft, or a clean window pane that gets you to a direct experience. We've seen how Basho stands toe-to-toe with the grand empathy of Shakespeare and the vital inevitability of Bach simply by recognizing the profound dignity of a common shepherd's purseweed.
Yeah.
We unpacked the non-moralizing, pure suchness of a frog splashing into a pond, and we grappled with the serene, fast loneliness, the sabashisa of accepting our own fleeting nature on a withered moor.
It is a stunning paradigm shift, and to leave you with something to really chew on after this ends, I want to bring up a quote that Blyth references from the 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza.
Okay, let's hear it.
Spinoza's thought perfectly encapsulates the ultimate endgame of this Zen perspective on nature. Spinoza writes, "I would warn you that I do not attribute to nature either beauty or deformity. Only in relation to our imagination can things be called beautiful or ugly."
Think about the gravity of that for a second. If nature intrinsically possesses neither beauty nor deformity, then every single time we judge a rainy day as miserable or a weed as ugly, we aren't actually saying anything about the rain or the weed.
No, we're not.
We are only broadcasting our own internal biases. We are literally complaining about ourselves. The universe is just a mirror reflecting our ego back at us.
That is the ultimate illusion Haiku tries to shatter. So here is our challenge for you today. When you walk outside, try to observe just one single thing.
Just one thing.
A puddle on the asphalt, a crack in the sidewalk, a bird sitting on a wire. Try to look at it without your imagination. Strip away the adjectives. Don't judge it as beautiful. Don't judge it as ugly. Don't try to turn it into a metaphor for your own life. Just let it exist exactly as it is and see if you can briefly disappear into it.
Step outside the Grand Museum, take down the velvet ropes, shatter the ornate gold picture frames, let the glass be perfectly transparent, and just see what is actually on the other side. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the extraordinary world of R.H. Blyth and the Haiku Masters. Keep your eyes open to the minute particulars, and we will see you next time.